So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Rees-Mogg refusing to say how quitting the EU has impacted the UK economy. So what Rees-Mogg does is he conflates kind of an impact assessment report with an economic prediction, which you would think his Eton education would teach him differently between what a prediction and an impact assessment is. But evidently, maybe Eton don't teach you that. Maybe they just teach arrogance. But Mogg refused to say how quitting the EU had affected Britain's economy, instead lashing out at experts who published reports on the damage it is causing. He failed to answer if the government had made any assessment of the economic harm or benefits of Brexit. You think they would at least do a report on the benefits of Brexit, no? But the reason they haven't done these reports is because Parliament can compel them to publish it. They did that to Theresa May, and it was very embarrassing for the government. Put on the spot by the Standard, he said, I'm not going to make those sorts of assessments because lots were made before the referendum and they were all bilge. I mean, that's not true. The I think it was the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, or the OBR, I can't remember which one it was, said our GDP would be hit around 4% in the short to medium term. Looks like that's happening. The Treasury told us that we were going to be bust and in the worst recession just by voting leave. I mean, we are heading towards a very bad recession. If it wasn't for the pandemic and the amount of quantitative easing we had, we'd be in trouble. We would have been in trouble a year ago, whenever Brexit happened. There is no point in inventing silly figures when lots of people have done, which lots of people have done, and they have been proved wrong so far. I mean, again, that's not really true, is it? He said the difference about new reports is that they are not forecasts or predictions of what would happen if Brexit happened, but instead they are analysis of the economic impact since Britain voted to leave, and a lot of that's based on economic modelling. They created, the so-called doppelganger economy, based on comparative nations to see what our economy would look like. The Treasury has so far failed to make public any assessment of the economic impact of Brexit, and again, I wonder why the Treasury haven't done so. The Bank of England has been accused of being reluctant to talk about it to avoid upsetting the government, and this is the Bank of England being kind of implicitly, if that's the right word here, not wanting to be used as a political weapon. Essentially, the Bank of England are meant to stay out of politics, but not talking about Brexit is getting involved politically because you are not going against the government. The Bank of England's job is to talk about this stuff, to keep interest rates and inflation in check, and talk about the things impacting the economy. And Brexit is one of them. We're going to see a medium-term inflation because of Brexit. Our economy will stay hot. I think there's a Bloomberg article on it. Yes, here it is. Bear with me 1 second. Which is that Brexit's legacy is hotter UK inflation risk for years ahead. Because if you think our imports have been extremely damaged, because yes, we're not doing things like physical checks and inspections, which will add more to our import costs, but we are still doing customs checks, and that adds a cost to the importer, which is then passed on to the consumer, thus pushing up the cost of living, inflation. Mogg's comments come just after a new report warned that Brexit will hit workers' real wages by nearly £500 a year and damage Britain's competitiveness. And there was a debate on Question Time a few years ago about freedom of movement, right, where they said the impact to workers' wages would be around 1%. Now, that's not a lot. They say, the impact of, freedom of movement, just looking at people's wages in specific ways, right? And then the person said, 1% is a lot to working people. Well, I'll tell you what's a lot to working people, £500 a year is a lot of money to people, but these things were never talked about. The UK has not seen a large relative decline in its exports to the EU, which is surprising that many predicted. I think it's mainly because we're exporting a lot more liquid gas now, because we don't have the storage facilities for it, so we have to do something with it, which is sell it to the EU. Although imports from the EU have fallen more swiftly than those of from the rest of the world, the study has suggested, and it's surprising that imports have fallen so much, given that it's just customs we're doing. We're not doing any of the physical inspections, etc. Since 2019, losing market share across three of its largest non-EU goods import markets in 2021, US, Canada and Japan. So, we're not doing great in terms of global trade. The full effect of the trade and cooperation agreement will take years to be felt. I don't think that's necessarily true. It's going to take years to be felt, to be honest. But the move towards a more closed economy, say the author, will make the UK less competitive. And at the end of the day, the EU members are picking up the slack for us. They might not be able to, completely do what we did in terms of goods, but they are trying, and that will continue to happen, especially when more companies in the UK look to relocate in the EU, and more multinationals will look at, should I set up shop in the UK or the EU? They're probably going to pick the EU. The research estimate that labour productivity will be reduced by 1.3% by the end of the decade by the changes in trading. alone contributing to weaker wage growth. Real pay set to be £470 per worker lower each year on average, and it would be otherwise than it would otherwise have been. So we'd be around £470 richer. And the simple fact is, setting it up as 1.3% labour, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you put it in real terms, right, when you talk about actual physical money in people's pockets, £470 per worker, that's a lot of money per year. That's lost, gone because of Brexit. And that's just one of the things that are gone. Another recent report by the Centre for European Reform estimated that the UK was being hit with a £31 billion blow of GDP from Brexit. However, Mogg rejected their findings, saying the regurgitations of Project Fear don't seem to me to get anybody anywhere by all the usual suspects. And again, he's going to poo-poo these figures because he's an idiot. And it will go against his kind of dogmatism of, Brexit is going to be great and all this stuff. Economic modelling isn't perfect, but, from what we can see, we're going to be one of the second lowest growing economy in the top 20 economies. The argument that it's because we got out of COVID quicker than the other countries, it simply isn't true, because the Scandinavian countries got out of lockdown, the last lockdown, a lot quicker than we did. So surely they should be struggling as well, but they're not. Earlier, the minister said a dashboard will be made available to the public to show quarterly how much EU law has been reformed, and I wouldn't be surprised, right, if they stop updating it after a while. He pledged a British-style revolution to get rid of unnecessary legislation. Making a statement in the Commons, Mogg said, "We must reform the EU law we have retained on our statute books." But the problem is, a lot of the EU law won't be changed. It will just be, put into British law officially. That'll be pretty much it. Like, it'll be kind of renamed, and kind of they might change the words slightly. But for them to change the laws is a lot more difficult, and it has to go through a lot more processes. He says, "Only through reform of this retained EU law will we finally be able to untangle ourselves of nearly 50 years of EU membership." And again, we played a key part in shaping a lot of the EU rules. It's just ridiculous. He went on, "I'm pleased to announce that today we publish an authoritative catalogue of over 2,400 pieces of legislation spanning over 300 individual policy areas." And obviously EU law is broad because the Council of Ministers kind of dictates where they want the direction of the EU to go in EU member states. Council of Ministers built up of leaders of individual member states and the relevant ministers. This catalogue will be available on the gov.uk website through an interactive dashboard, which I'm a big fan of interactive dashboards. It'll be updated quarterly. I mean, I'll keep an eye on this. Once that's up, we will do a kind of quarterly review of it and see if there's anything that's changed. Labour slammed the announcement as gimmicks, saying this will do nothing to address the real challenges that the public face today. I mean, that's great, but are Labour going to do anything to help with the real challenges people face today? I'm waiting. Shadow Foreign Secretary Steve Doty told MPs this simply appears to be a vanity project, which he's right on. It's quite extraordinary that on the day that inflation tops 9%, the cost of energy is soaring, families facing massive pressures, wondering how they'll put food on the table, prices are rising at the fastest rate of 40 years. The government's offer for the British is a digital filing cabinet of existing legislation, which the gentleman describes in his own words as marginal, so it's not going to make a big difference regardless. And if we look at these things, right, inflation topping 9%, the cost of imports, and the weakening pound plays a large role in inflation, in my opinion. The cost of energy, again, we import a lot of energy from France and other countries, a lot of fuel as well. The weakening pound will have a big impact on that. The cost of living crisis in food is something we import a lot of. So you can see kind of the Brexit pressures on the economy, especially when we could have had an extension period as well. The EU offered a 2-year extension rather than a 1-year transition period, and we took a 1 year. The government plans to cut 20% of civil servants. The Cabinet Office creating tasks for them to satisfy his own obsession. So essentially, you've got a massive loss, a lack of civil servants already, I think. They're cutting 20%, and Mogg's just creating them stupid tasks to do. I mean, these are fairly easy. They'll get on with them at a decent speed. But at the end of the day, they could be doing a lot better work. So it's a bit messy, this article. I've got to do some other stuff. But point being is that Mogg won't do impact assessment reports, for one. That's a key problem. 2, he's saying, it's a load of economic bilge. Well, why do we do impact assessment reports then? We should never do them again if they're just a load of rubbish. He talks about the forecast some people made before Brexit. To be fair, we didn't even know what kind of Brexit we were going to get at the time. We were told we're going to stay in the single market. That would alleviate a lot of the problems we have with imports and exports. But yeah, I'm just so sick of this guy. I want him to get voted out. Hopefully the Lib Dems can do the business and get rid of this joker, but it's not very likely, is it? Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.